Welcome to an interview on the subject of the craft of character. We have with us today Salvatore Sciabona, one of my favorite novelists, here to talk to us about writing and developing character and dialogue. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thank you.
I was wondering what you think makes for memorable dialogue and how you develop that.
I think dialogue as the accelerator of action. I remember actually the only piece of writing advice I ever got from anyone in my family was my grandmother when I was in the 6th grade, and I was writing my first, what I thought of my first novel, and she said, more dialogue. That was all of her advice. And I think, so I guess what makes it really successful is when it has the music of speech, when it has the speed of speech. Often it has the broken syntax of speech. Mm-hmm. My mother, I use this line in my novel actually, my mother at one point said about a person, she has that sunglasses that she rips them off her face, like, now I'm supposed to be scared. Mm-hmm. And I just thought there was something that was, the problem was that she said that instead of those, but she was going so fast that it was exactly the right word. Now, if you just tried to mimic every single departure from standard usage that a person made, and you put all of the ums and the uhs and the you knows. The guy on the radio coming into the office today was this guy was constantly saying "and stuff." Mm-hmm. I mean, one "and stuff" is brilliant. When you try to be faithful to the whole thing, it just looks like it's gibberish. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do you sculpt the departures, the little freckles, as it were, in a way that makes them alive?
That brings me to something that seems to me to be exactly at the locus of dialogue and style, which is, how do you feel about written dialect? And why do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it can be quite controversial because people can feel historically, people have written people in other classes, other races, and they've tried to do the dialect in a way that was really lampooning of say, people who didn't speak the Queen's English. But on the other hand, if you turn everybody's speech into Balzac, if you turn everybody's speech into exactly the same kind of formal diction, well, you're losing out on the genius of and all the fun of talking. So I guess Strunk and White say about this in the Elements of Style. We talk about this in my course in the specialization, the craft of style. They say don't write in dialect unless your ear is really good. And I think that's a very good standard. I mean, use your ear scrupulously. Some of the best writers of dialogue, like I think Don DeLillo is a brilliant writer of dialogue, and that man has such an ear for the way people talk, and yet at other points, you would never mistake the things that people were saying in his novels for like real conversation. It's stylized, but it takes something away from the dialect of that person. Another great observer of this is Flannery O'Connor in her essay Writing Short Stories, which is in her book Mystery and Manners. She is talking to a group of writers from the South, and they're mostly from Georgia and Tennessee. And she says, there's nothing in any of these stories that is particular to that place. These people could be in Baltimore or St. Paul or anywhere. And she thinks of this lost opportunity because these people are writing about a particular spot and they're not using the speech patterns of that place, and you lose it. So that in some way, like, if you really know a place and you know the way people talk there, you absolutely should, I think, use the texture of spoken language in that.
I want to underline this point that Salvatore is making, because this has to do with the art of dialogue and the necessity of choosing the right word and listening for the sound of the sentence, whether you are representing somebody from your own group and your own culture and your own language, or somebody from a very different group, it's so important to listen to the way real people are speaking, so then you can do a little shaping and a little chemistry and a little magic to put it into dialogue that your reader will be able to hear the way you want them to hear it. I have one more question for you. What character for you has been the hardest one to write so far, and why do you think it was difficult for you?
In my own work?
In your own work.
Well, no one has ever asked me that question. There's a character named Lena in my novel, The End, who, well, I think the issue was that she was extremely inward. She was extremely interior as a matter of temperament, and that made me want to, in early drafts, write long passages that were dream-like. At the end, at certain points, I just felt that she wasn't really there. She wasn't actually. I was trying to get at an inward character by writing about her inner life directly. And in the later drafts, I realized that what I wanted to do was just watch her in the world, and then watch and other people talking around her and her not talking, dramatized her inwardness without having to directly say it. She was very, the fact that she was, you would think in some ways, I mean, people often get intimidated about writing about a character who's not their own sex. And I've never really felt that was a big issue. It's much more writing about women. I mean, half my characters are women, more or less. But writing about people who have really radically different temperaments. I'm a really talky person. A person who really doesn't talk is hard for me to do, because they don't. I imagine actually in this character, she didn't really experience the world through a texture of language. The people that were around her very often did. She experienced the world through a texture of emotion. So the question was, how do you get that in language? Because language is all we have. I mean, we are not painting. I have to get at a silent person with a medium that's not silent.
And so it sounds like you got at her silence both through your language as the creator of the character, and also by putting her in circumstances in which we could see her silence. We didn't have to hear her talk about it. Again, show, and then a little telling. Thank you so much for joining us today.